Good afternoon. My name is Callie Williams, Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program. Welcome to the August 2020 Sandwiching and History Tour of the Sappington-Reinman House in downtown Little Rock. This house was originally built in the 1880s as a two-story Queen Anne-style home. One of the earliest residents was Colonel George Washington Sappington, a well-known lawyer and real estate developer. The house was transformed into a classical revival-style home around 1911, and in the later decades, the second floor of the house was lost during a large fire. After the fire, and while owned by Lewis Reinman, the house was remodeled into a single-story craftsman-style residence. What is known today as the Governor's Mansion Historic District in downtown Little Rock was originally located along the southern edge of the original plat of the city of Little Rock. Throughout the early and mid-1800s, the city of Little Rock grew towards the south and east, with new residential areas spreading as the city's population continued to grow. After the Civil War, the population of Little Rock grew from just over 3,500 in 1860 to over 12,000 in 1870, a nearly four-fold increase. As the city grew toward the south, several new churches and civic institutions were built along with new residential areas. One major institution was the Arkansas School for the Blind, which was moved from Arkadelphia to Little Rock in 1868. The school was located on empty property to the south of the city, at the intersection of 18th and Center Street. In 1885, a large new brick building with a striking central tower topped by a tall, faceted dome was started, with additional adjacent buildings being built in the following years. This large building, with its distinctive tower, would serve as a landmark at the end of Center Street for many decades. This property would continue to be the home of the Arkansas School for the Blind until the late 1930s, when the school was moved to the west of the city to make way for a new Arkansas governor's mansion on the property. By the 1880s, the block surrounding the School for the Blind started to fill with new, large, high-style residences. This included a new house for Colonel George Washington Sappington along Center Street, just a block and a half south of the School for the Blind's campus. George Washington Sappington was born in Charleston, Virginia, and eventually moved to Florida at the age of 19 due to poor health. He met his first wife, Winifred B. Croom, while living in Florida, and the two were married in April of 1851. The couple would have one surviving child, Richard Bryan Sappington, in 1852. Sadly, Winifred Sappington died in 1856 after contracting cholera on a trip to Atlanta, Georgia. By 1860, G.W. Sappington and his young son were living near Gaines Landing in Franklin Township of Chico County, Arkansas, where he was noted as a local planter with a relatively large landholding. George Sappington had purchased a plantation along the Mississippi River adjacent to property owned by Miss Verinda Pendleton, a widow. In October of 1865, Miss Verinda Althea Gaines Pendleton became the next Miss Sappington after she and G.W. Sappington were married in Chico County. The couple, along with Verinda's daughter, Althea Early Pendleton, and George's son, Richard Sappington, as well as George's sister Kate Sappington, would continue to live in Chico County until 1885. In the 1860 federal slave census, both Verinda Pendleton and George Sappington are noted as slaveholders. When Verinda and George married in 1865, those people that they held in bondage would have been already officially emancipated during the course of the Civil War. At some point either before or during the Civil War, George Sappington became known as Colonel Sappington, although it is unclear how he earned the title colonel. A few surviving military letters from the Civil War period note that he was referred to as Colonel Sappington during and possibly even before the war, but it appears he was not serving for either side. Rather, he seemed to be in a business providing supplies. After the Civil War, Sappington helped to promote the need for levees along the Mississippi River, as well as promoted the growth of various railroads throughout southeastern Arkansas, in addition to his work as a planter. It is unknown whether George Sappington commissioned or simply purchased a speculatively built house when he moved to Center Street in Little Rock in the mid-1880s. He and his family are noted in city directories for the city of Little Rock as living in the house on Center Street as early as 1886. Although he had training as a lawyer, George Sappington worked for many years as a real estate developer and an insurance agent, both in southeast Arkansas, and this he continued in Little Rock. By 1887, he ran the G.W. Sappington and Company real estate firm with an office on West Markham Street in downtown Little Rock. He often advertised various properties across the city for sale or rent in the local newspapers and had interest in many pieces of property across the county. This earliest house on the property on Center Street was built as a wood-framed residence with exterior wood siding in the then popular Queen Anne style, now sometimes referred to as the Victorian style. Unfortunately, only one partial photograph of the house is known to exist, showing a small portion of the corner of the house that was captured in an early image of the Ragland house next door. In 1899, just a few weeks before Christmas, a small but dangerous fire in the house was reported in the local newspaper. Fortunately, it appears that the fire did not severely damage the structure of the house. In 1903, George Sappington's second wife, Verinda, passed away after a long illness. George Sappington would continue to live in the home until his death in January of 1906. He had been working as normal the day before, but was taken suddenly ill and died at home in his sleep. After the death of George Sappington, the house was left as part of his estate, and passed from his surviving sister Ellen Douglas to his granddaughter Winnie Beth Sappington in early 1906. In October of 1907, Richard Sappington, George Sappington's only child, passed away. Richard Sappington had worked for many years as a railroad conductor in southeast Arkansas, then served as a United States Marshal before working for the Little Rock Street Railway Company. Shortly after her father Richard's death, Winnie Beth Sappington married William Sexton Rawlings in November of 1907. The couple would live at her father's house along 9th Street. From 1906 through 1911, the Sappington house on Center Street appears from surviving records to have been offered for sale several times and may have served periodically as a rental property. In late 1911, Mr. and Mrs. Rawlings sold the house on Center Street to Mr. Lewis Reinman, who quickly hired W.D. Holtzman Jr. to prepare plans for a full remodel of the property. This may have been needed as the house was thought to have been damaged by fire yet again in 1910 or 1911. Mr. Holtzman was a prolific builder in Arkansas, including building several houses along the 500 block of 9th Street, as well as the Deshay County Courthouse, which had been designed by Rome Harding in 1899. Holtzman seems to have been a competent designer as well as a building contractor. His plans for the renovations to the old Colonel Sappington house on Center Street included modernizing the home with new colonial-style additions, such as a large 2-story classical porch supported by 3 tall columns with composite capitals, replacing what was likely an asymmetrical Queen Anne-style front porch. Also, the front yard was enclosed with a brick retaining wall with exaggerated brick corner posts topped with ornamental stonework featuring stone spheres nestled in square brackets. A tall porte-cochere, or early form of a carport, was added to the side of the house. On the interior, the basement was, quote, fitted up, end quote, most likely to make it suitable for maids' quarters or rental space. Also, the front parlor and dining room were renovated, with interior wood ornamentation and large archways, as well as a new front stairway and a den space with a massive new fireplace. This renovation may also have been when the large ornamental fireplace surround and mantel was added in the front parlor space. There was also a 2-story garage, with servants' quarters above, added at the rear of the property during this time. Lewis Reinman had arrived in Little Rock in circa 1875 as a young man after moving to the United States from Germany with his family. He lived with his mother, father, and several siblings in the family home at 8th and Scott Streets for several years. Soon after arriving in Little Rock, he started a livery and stable business in partnership with his father, known as Reinman & Son. Lewis Reinman soon built a good reputation for his business sense and ability to handle horses and mules. His riding ability was even noted in the local paper, as he was often seen riding down Markham Street. By the early 1900s, he owned and operated several livery stables, many in partnership with other firms or businessmen, and he had built a large business that provided mules wholesale to local farmers as well as to various international clients, including the British and French governments. Reinman's first mule barn was located at 3rd and Louisiana Street. However, after several years in business at this location, tensions developed between Reinman and the owners of businesses located just 1 block over along Main Street. The business owners complained of the smell and noise associated with the mules and the issues caused when large numbers of mules were moved in or out of the stables. Eventually, Reinman was forced to move his wholesale mule business to North Little Rock along East Washington Avenue. According to his nephew, Fred Seltz, who was interviewed by the Voices of Arkansas Project about his work with mules in Arkansas, Lewis Reinman was a well-known and well-respected horse and mule dealer in Arkansas, and made a good living through his retail and wholesale businesses. Reinman ran several large livery businesses, including the Reinman and Wolfert stables and wholesale business, with Mr. Lewis Wolfert. Reinman provided mules locally to farmers as well as to national and international buyers, including providing 3,800 mules to the British government for use during the Boer War in South Africa, and sometimes selling over 100 mules a week to the British government for use in Europe during World War I. Reinman was also aware of the ongoing decline in the horse and livery stable business during the early 20th century, due to the introduction and quick adoption of the automobile. By 1918, the Reinman and Wolfert business offered automobile and truck sales as services alongside their horses and mules. Lewis Reinman lived in the home on Center Street with his family from 1911 until the late 1940s. His first wife, Helen Alston Reinman, whom he married in 1906, passed away in the family home in January of 1920. By 1925, Lewis Reinman had remarried to Miss Josephine Loeb, and the couple continued to live at the house on Center Street for the next 2 decades. During the late 1920s, another large fire destroyed much of the original second story of the house. After the fire, the roof was reconstructed at a new lower height, which still allowed for some limited living space on the second floor. This new roof, however, drastically changed the exterior appearance of the house. In addition, new brick and stonework was added to the exterior of the house, transforming it into a more craftsman-style appearance, which was popular at the time. Today, the house maintains this 1930s appearance, although the house's interior core is actually older than the 2 houses to the north. Josephine Reinman passed away in March of 1940, and by the late 1940s, Lewis Reinman moved to the Marion Hotel, where his care was directed by his sister. He passed away at over 90 years of age in early 1951. After being sold by Mr. Reinman in the late 1940s, the home then went through a succession of several owners, with the basements and sometimes upstairs rented out for additional income. In 1978, this house was listed in the National Register of Historic Places as a contributing resource in the Governor's Mansion Historic District. The house was most recently purchased by Mr. and Mrs. Burkett, who have undertaken several large renovation and restoration projects at the property, including installing new HVAC units, a new roof, additional foundation support, a new upstairs configuration, as well as installing a new grand front staircase to replace the lost original front staircase. During their renovations, the Burketts found remnants of original painted plasterwork and evidence of the original staircase, as well as remnants of early tile work from what would have been an upstairs bathroom. The Burketts continued to work on their new home, with additional projects planned to continue to maintain the house as an interesting and important historic home in downtown Little Rock. Thank you for joining us today. More information on all of the sites listed in the National Register of Historic Places in Arkansas can be found on the Arkansas Historic Preservation Program's website at arkansaspreservation.com. You can also check out videos of past tours on our YouTube channel under Arkansas Preservation. Our next Sandwiching in History tour will be of the Bull Park Pavilion in Little Rock. This tour will take place as a virtual tour, premiering on our Facebook page on Friday, September 4th at noon. Please check our Facebook page and our website at arkansaspreservation.com for the most up-to-date information on our tours and programs. We will continue to provide virtual tours until it is safe to return to in-person tours in the future.